Welcome everybody to Creation Worldview. This is session 1 from the creation account to the fall, and the key verses tonight are Genesis 1 to 3, chapters 1 to 3, not just 3 verses. I prayed. I just had something in mind I was going to pray, so I'll just bow our heads one more time. Lord, there are forces that desire to make us lost and keep us lost, Satan, the world, and our flesh. And Lord, we pray that you'd help us to understand, to gain knowledge, and to apply it, that we would have wisdom and discernment, and that you'd help us to stand up and be courageous and bold as you desire us to be as ambassadors. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so let's begin. Let's make sure things are rolling right. Okay. Yeah, so a little about me. Most of you know me. I'm Jay. I've might see Jeremy Palko around once in a while. But I'm on the Connect Ministry team. I've been with Harvest for about 2.5 years. I am a COVID transfer, as I think is a story for a lot of people here. There are a lot of those stories over the time. And as far as me personally, I'm a father of 2. My education is from U of W. I graduated with my bachelor's and master's in engineering, mechanical with a materials option. And I've been practicing as an engineer for over 20 years in automotive, as well as in marine engineering, but primarily in, we'll say, design development side of things. So having to do with body in white hardware design, as well as engine design and development. So got some of that as in my background, and gives me maybe a bit of a unique perspective on what we'll be talking about today in terms of creation and how that lines up against evolution and such. So a little while ago, there was a creation conference, Answers in Genesis. Some of you may have been there. It was February of 22. And then, so this is a bit of a continuing growth development on that. That apologetics I see as a muscle that you have to work to get stronger. If you don't, it atrophies and you lose confidence and it gets weaker. So you have to put it into practice. There is really no middle ground on it, I find. And so it's something that that hopefully you'll be encouraged to do more of. So in terms of a creation worldview, what I'm saying here, the little tagline that maybe you saw in the app, was to boldly defend your faith from the beginning to a lost world. And so that's what we're planning to do over the next 4 weeks. And just on Mondays. You don't have to be here every day. It's just 4 times. But session 1 is from the creation account to the fall. 2, be law and theory, evidence and bias. So if you're that type of a right brain thinker, that's what we're going to get into there. And 3 is the flood, fossils, and dinosaurs, what I find particularly fascinating of that part of it, and Job 40. Then session 4, how to engage and stand firm. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's where it's actually put into practice. So a lot of us gain head knowledge. We go to these conferences and we stuff ourselves full of information, but then do we ever really go out and share it when we're called to? And I think becoming sensitive to that spurring is also a learned skill. So the overall objective here is to be stronger and bolder Christians who rightly divide the truth, to not be corrupted by the foolishness that is so prevalent in our world, by gaining the knowledge, wisdom, and discernment needed to not only defend our faith, but to attack the lies that undermine the spiritual growth of our children, family, and friends. So maybe you've heard on the men's side of things, Adam say, always on offense. There's something to that, obviously, right? Is to go out there and to bring order to chaos. And, that's something that we'll get into more as we go along. So over the next 4 weeks, we'll try and slow the pace down a little bit. So Answers in Genesis was, it was like drinking through a fire hose, I think. And a lot of us are like, wow, that's amazing. I don't know what I retained, but, that was great. And, you could go to their website. There's creation.org, Answers in Genesis. There's a lot of awesome resources out there, by the way. But we're going to try and slow it down. And so the idea here, and I know some of you are in the back, and I probably can still hear you in the back, but is a little bit of interaction. So I teach Harvest kids. And, I always encourage interaction, right? Is to think out loud, talk out loud. And some of you are maybe quiet thinkers. I have to write it down, go home and think about it, and I'll come back with an answer. Some of you do think out loud. You want to hear yourself talk, and that's how you're forming your thoughts. So I'm open to whatever you have. And when I ask a question, it's up to you if you want to, speak up. If you don't want to, it's okay. We're not going to call you out, but I definitely encourage you. You can practice here real time in a friendly environment. That'd be the idea. So moving on with the introduction here, the main point is that to drive home. So trying to do the speaking thing. So you don't want to make too many points. Definitely been guilty of that in the past. But you want to basically just say, what is the main point here? And is that all was done in 6 days. That's when time started. We corrupted what God declared as very good, and our sin resulted in the curse over mankind, all of creation, right? So it's just to bring that home, to understand that that is what we're trying to drive at, and we'll dig into that a little bit deeper. So in terms of worldview, it is a particular philosophy of life or conception of the world. As Christians, and these are general, right? So there are so many rabbit trails and holes you can go down in terms of your worldview, religion, who's coming from where, and who's saying what. It can really kind of drive you nuts. Good thing as Christians is that we have the Bible to lead us and guide us. But if you just start doing searches on the internet, man, and depending on who you're talking to, right? So as Christians, we believe in God and base our worldview on faith that he is real. Atheists don't believe in God and base their worldview on faith in time and chance. Some of you are obviously, this is obvious and clear, but make sure we're all on the same page. And that there are 3 general categories. There'd be theism, transcendentalism, and naturalism. And so, before we go on though, I'm curious, who has had the worldview conversation with family, friends, coworkers, whomever, and has kind of gotten down to that debate of, you say this, I say that, but then it comes down to a matter of authority. You know, that's what I have found. Is you got a few hands up? Yeah, okay. And if you haven't had it with other people, have you had that conversation with yourself? Most likely. Yeah, we all talk to ourselves. They say it's a sign of intelligence, so, at least that's what I tell myself all the time. So as far as theism goes, though, we'd say it's a broad, and I'm no religion major, and there's probably people here who can correct me after. Thank you very much. Please don't do it live. But overall, God is creator, but maybe impersonal deism, not infinite finitism, or loving impersonal, as the Bible states. Transcendentalism is basically that all reality is material and spiritual, so at least they're acknowledging the spiritual, but then there is a universal life force who's kind of got that feeling from people you talk to, right? Well, I acknowledge there's something bigger than us, but I'm not going to put a name, a face on it. I don't want to actually identify it, because then with that comes accountability. So then that we are all a part of God. I mean, I've had this conversation a number of times with certain people, and certain people too many times. But such as pantheism, is also rolled into this, that all is God, such that nature and God are the same. Animism, mythological indwelling of spirits. So there is a spirit of the tiger. There is a spirit of the, so it's no longer within that object or being. It's actually now outside. And so I guess enough down that one. Then there's a naturalism, that the material world is all there is. It's explained by observation. Basically, you die, then fade to black. And then, so atheism, maybe obviously being the opposite of theism. And then humanism relying on human good and morality and experiences to navigate life. And then there's existentialism, which is basically this, I think it basically removes that a human is actually good, and just says, okay, by your experiences, you can discover. And there's this theory of an absurd universe and all that, which I think some of this universe right now is absurd. I think we've all observed that. But the point being that there's a wide range of worldviews, but as a Christian, we have one. And that's an important thing to come back to, because you have to establish this. You need a foundation to stand on, right? It has to be firm. Because you'll get kicked around. You get into all these conversations and people will come at you. And usually there's more than one, And so knowing what you believe, why you believe it matters. Be ready to give an answer. So the primary differentiator, though, we'll say also, is that all their faiths rely on dead people or dead things. And although the Christian faith has a God who is alive and active. And really what I have found to the cutting question in a lot of these conversations is, who do you say Jesus is? Right? And that's a trigger, I think, to me to go down some really good discussions and to get away from this just circular discussion that is just spinning your wheels and going nowhere. So apologetics, which we're primarily talking about right now, is derived from the Greek word apologia, meaning formal defense, and essentially means to answer why you believe what you believe as a means of defending the faith that is being questioned. So as a biblical example, Paul addresses the Areopagus in Romans 17:22-34. for the purposes of time, I won't read it all through, but in there's a teaching on the altar inscription that he gives. And the Areopagus was Athens, Greece, and it was leading leaders and thinkers in that community. And so he was essentially going there and he was making his case to them because they were interested in hearing what he had to say. And he said, God is creator, that Jesus was rose from the dead, and that he's come back to judge the world. And out of that, some mocked, some considered. They're like, hey, we'll hear you again on this. And then some believed. And I think that is something that is a common response, right? You have discussion with people who are like, you're crazy. I want to hear more. Or actually, what church do you go to? Which you'd hope would be the solution in the end of the discussion there. So carrying on here, and the reason we're identifying and defining some of these terms is so that we're all on the same page and that we're all in agreement as we go forward. So faith, there's two definitions of what I had found, right? Suspect by two different people groups. So depending on who you ask, they're going to give you maybe a different definition. Neutrally speaking, though, it's a complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Pretty straightforward. And as atheists and company, they might say it's a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension, that you have fear and anxiety about life, and it's rather than proof. You're driven to it because you're scared. And it's like, no, that's actually rather belittling and demeaning and disrespectful towards me as a Christian, but it serves their purpose to actually, first and foremost, ignore the reality that they're not being objective. So, and then a comment here too that I had found said this pedia.com. It was the main difference between faith and religion is that faith is a complete trust and confidence in someone or something, whereas religion is a specific system of belief and or worship, often involving a code of ethics and philosophy. Now, both creation and evolution require presupposition to properly investigate and consider. So actually give God a chance. Right, we'll say, and that not actually, reject him outright from the beginning. And that's hard to do with some people. They're like, you're crazy. And they just don't even want to wrap their heads around it. They don't want to start the conversation. But to have a truly objective approach, not clouded by bias due to desired outcomes, which I would say is a hard thing for humans to do just in general, because often we know what we want the outcome to be. And that's what you're trying to work around, is say, before you jump to that conclusion, hear me out. So both creation and evolution in this general context rely primarily on historical science and cannot be repeated in the lab, observational science. Now there's different types of evolution, and like I said, it's a huge topic. It's actually kind of mind-blowing. But the point being is that we kind of have to look back and to see what happened, because we can't really, it's been attempted to try and reproduce evolution in the lab. It failed. And we can get into that more too. It's called the Miller spark tube experiment if you want to look it up. But I'll get into that more. So what I've been kind of referring to then is axioms. It's a statement or proposition that is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true. So a creationist axiom is that God is creator of the universe. An atheist axiom is that the universe is a product of time and chance. In other words, we got lucky, right? That's basically what they're saying. And they're not assigning an identity or a personhood to, how did that happen? And, so that's a tough thing to do. So there's nothing against, I guess, having an axiom and then investigating. But it's to actually give yourself a chance to hold that axiom long enough to actually objectively pursue an answer. And that's, I think, a lot of times what people are unwilling to do. But as Christians, we have no choice but to go down the evolution road, because we hear it. We've heard it in high school. We've heard it. You hear it in the news. You hear it on Discovery, TLC. If you've gone to post-secondary education, it's incessant. It's everywhere. It's nonstop. And they just say it like it's fact, but it's always been a theory of evolution. And Darwin himself doubted himself, but for some reason, everybody else doesn't doubt it. So go figure. But so I guess before we go on though, I was going to ask the question, but I think you guys already kind of gave it, so we're good. So the question here though is would you be ready? So preparation is the best prevention from being swayed into worldly foolishness, right? In Ephesians 4:13-14, it reads, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. So as mentioned earlier, family, friends, co-workers, teachers, right? Enemies, intellectuals, reporters, politicians, institutions in society all have opinions for you to believe, and they're going to push it on you. And we've seen that. We know that happens. And a lot of these, too, these are people who are in authority in your life. And that makes it even harder to stand your ground, right? Because depending on who they are, especially if it's a teacher in high school, as a child, basically, you're being told something and you're trusting that they're telling you the truth, but they're not actually telling you the other side. And so now we have to go into this, well, where do I go get that from? And hopefully, depending on what school you go to, obviously, if you're going to Harvest Christian Academy, you're doing fine. So I did, personally though, I did go to, I went to a Catholic grade school for a while, then we moved to Romeo, Michigan for a bit, and I was in public school, elementary, and then Hamilton Parsons, and then Romeo Junior High, Romeo High School. So that was all public school. And then I went to Sandwich and I came back here. And I was a Christian at a young age. At 6, recommitted at 13, meaning the light went on. I realized that I actually need to, God's calling me to do something more than just, this isn't just fire insurance. But at a young age, I grew up through that, and I learned to understand how to be separate from the world, even though there's a lot of temptations being thrown your way. But the point here is to be ready. So what if you were, so as a bit of a thought experiment, what if you were corralled into a room of people and asked what your worldview is, right? Some of you probably are sweating right now. But alternatively, you weren't asked, you were told. We all came from primordial ooze or whatever whatever their suggestion might be. So I don't know if anybody wants to feedback. This is definitely, like I said, I'll be interactive a little bit. How would you feel? Or maybe how would you answer? Or maybe how have you felt? Or how have you answered? Stephen?
Usually nowadays, when people bring this topic up, which has been interesting to me, I like to ask, what proof is there, what observable scientific proof that a species has evolved into a new species?
Excellent. Yeah, that's a very good one.
Not one answer yet. I've gotten answers, but not right.
Yeah.
That bird, on the island, if that was a bird or a bird.
Yeah, Darwin's finches, I think it was, yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
evolved, like us,
Right.
right, from a monkey to a
Right.
human, which is a different species.
Exactly. So yeah, what you're referring to is like transspeciation versus adaptation. And then there's macroevolution versus microevolution, which macroevolution would be transspeciation, microevolution would be adaptation. So in other words, how camouflage was the animal and, susceptible to being preyed upon. So that's good. Yeah, exactly. So some of this is rhetorical too. So, for you to think, when you get into that situation, what will you do, right? So I've taken motorcycle training. One of the acronyms is SIPT. It's scan, identify, predict, and execute, right? Oh, sorry, you want to share? Go ahead. Yep.
I was homeschooled, so all my parents from Christian. But anyways, when I went to college and university, what I don't understand is how do they think that we come from amoeba, but amoeba isn't.
Right. Yeah. We would all agree that an amoeba is an amoeba, but then, yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying. It's just true. I'm just realizing how time flies. Okay. So it's just something for you to have in your mind, to think about, and to, as we go along throughout this, is to lock a few of these things away and have them ready. Because I guarantee you, I expect opportunities are going to arise over the next 4 weeks, just because we're talking about this. Okay. So that, remember that both can't be right. These are mutually exclusive, right? Creation, evolution. The two cannot reconcile one to the other, right? And so either God is a creator or there have been beneficial mutations, but you can't have both. And we'll get into more of that, a little bit about theistic evolution and such. So now we're getting to the creation account. I'm not sure if I'll have time to read it all. It was the plan, but I just realized how time has flown. So days of creation, and 1 and 2, in the beginning, God. So this is an account, not a parable or a poem, right? This is an account. So the writing style matters. What you're reading, how you're interpreting it matters. It's a literal account. So on day 1 and 2, or days 1, there was light and dark, day and night. And then God said, so there was evening and there was morning the first day. And then sky and sea was on day 2. And this is where it separated the two. So now you had the firmament, the heavens, and then the water below. And this is where God said, and God saw that it was good. And then we go down here to day 3, land and vegetation, 9 to 13. And this one I'm going to read because there's a word in here I want you guys to capture. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, there was morning, the third day. So maybe you heard the key word in there. Anybody want to guess? Yes, Jimmy, good job. So kind, that's huge. That is, it's because it's saying it was a full, complete creation. It was a kind, right? And so that's something to remember, because that's what transspeciation is that you're going from one species to the other. And we'll get into this more in the next sessions about, is that in the fossil record? And that's where Darwin said the proof would be. So yeah, just amazing things then also about the sun, the moon, and stars in 14 and 19, that there were lights, there was a greater light and a lesser light. So we obviously have nice light by day, but we also have a little bit of light by night. Yes? Yeah, you're getting ahead of me. Okay. With sun, moon, and stars, though, it's interesting to note that marks the seasons, and it obviously gives us light, and thankfully it's not completely dark, pitch black at night. We actually have some nights are actually quite bright with the moon, which is kind of a cool thing. But go ahead, yeah.
When I was reading creation and the word earth, it kind of made me think, I'm not a historian, so I have no idea, but how long have we used the word earth? Is it from the Bible? Everyone everywhere on the earth uses the word earth.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, should have read Genesis 1:1 out of all the verses. But Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So,
I don't know if the word earth is created or made defined from the Bible and carried around the world, or was the word earth for them? It's just weird how everyone, everywhere in the world,
I see what you're saying.
uses the word to describe the thing we live on.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't get into the origins or the etymology of the word earth, but we can definitely look it up a little more. I mean, for me, it's, I guess I'm reading it as it's written, and that, it's a biblical account, but it's a good one. No, that's okay. I don't have the answer ready yet, Stephen, sorry. Yeah.
Some people say that Hebrew language is limited in the meaning of art. They sometimes use it to be the universe. That is the body, ground, or the soil.
Okay.
You can have multiple.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get into that a little bit more with another word. That's critical. So yeah, just going through the account so that I'm not sure if everybody read. If you haven't read through Genesis 1 to 3, I definitely recommend you read through it. So, so as far as life, and then in the sea and air on day 5, so that's 20 to 23. Scroll back down here. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the 5th day. So even the animals, were commanded to be fruitful, to multiply. That God obviously enjoys abundance. He calls us to do the same. And then further down, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. So I think we're getting the pattern here. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So reading this, it should be obvious that we are created male and female. Obviously, there's a whole lot of confusion nowadays, and I think to a lot of us in the room, we just shake our heads, and it is jaw-dropping. I cannot believe, I don't even know, I don't even want to say the alphabet soup word that they use. It's just jaw-dropping to me where we're at. But, it just shows that, God, he gave us a creation account. The Bible, he gives us boundaries, and they're healthy boundaries. He knows what the design intent was. He knows how it's supposed to be used. As an engineer, I have to follow certain standards, certain specifications. When we actually design and develop and release something, we have to verify and validate it for production. And those actually flow into what would be service and owner manuals, right? So we tell the customer how to use this, say, vehicle or this vessel. Right? And so God tells us, he's telling us exactly what we ought to be doing. And we're like, nah, I got better ideas. But clearly it's, some people realize too late, it's blowing up in their face. So it should be obvious from these verses who the author of life is, what our position on relationships, environment, homosexuality, abortion, euthanasia ought to be. Right? And this is huge. That's why if you don't have that solid foundation to stand on from Genesis, the rest of the Bible all comes into question. It matters, and it matters huge. So on seventh day, God rested. And from that so we get our Sabbath day of rest. And then thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. So it was finished. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So again, here, it's kind of said twice. He had done, right? It's not, he started, then walked away and just, hope for the best. He said, it's done. So God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So there's 3 he had dones in there, right? I think it's kind of like emphasizing the fact that it was me. And then, so it goes on to talk about obviously more about Adam and Eve and such, and the garden. And that in verse 16, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. So the reason we're kind of getting into this a little bit too. So first we'll just cover the fact, these key takeaways from the creation account. 1, who did it and how, right? God spoke the universe into existence. Was it slow or evening and morning days? These were 24-hour yom days. Like, what's a yom? Did you misspell yam? No. Yom is the Hebrew word for day. There are different meanings in different contexts, but in this context, when the word day is preceded by a numerical adjective, it's referring to a 24-hour day. So when somebody says, well, there's age gap theory, this can be theistic evolution. There could be a day, then gajillions of years, then another day, and more gajillions, and it's like, no, that's not what happened. And the other proof to that is, too, that as Nicole mentioned, that as you step through it, at the very end, when God got to the end and he created man on the sixth day, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. So the entire completion of creation, he declared it to be very good. But so I guess the point here being that when he finished, it was done. He did it. They were 24-hour days, and there was no death in prior to the fall. There was no bloodshed. So in order for there to be evolution occurring, during that time period, you have to have trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, right? A bunch of mutated freaks that are like growing and dying and somehow gradually evolving to a higher and more complex and higher functioning being. But the Genesis account says absolutely not. It says that it was done. And so to say that there's theistic evolution, which is out there, it is being taught, and it is leading people astray, it's a lie. So was it very good or bad? Any room for error? No. God created perfection. Transspeciation, as we talked about earlier, or each by their kind. We heard the word kind a few times in there. So it was all fully complete within their kinds. And then loving or caring or cold and distant. It was a very personal and intimate process, especially for man and woman, right? So God created man from dust, breathed life into his nostrils, and then he brought out of Adam's side is how he created Eve. Right, so this is all very personal, very intimate, and it shows the level of care, and especially for the pinnacle of creation of man and woman, how much attention he gave to it, and that was a very personal process, and that goes to his character today, because a lot of times what's happening is it's a character assassination of God is what is happening in culture, and so carrying that forward from Genesis all the way through the Bible, that God is a personal, loving, and caring creator matters. Because otherwise you can be deceived, just as Eve was, that God's holding out on you, right? And so that can result into a lie that can corrupt you as a person and be led astray. And then of course Adam, he's sinned. Now the reason the curse came through Adam is because he was told directly, "You shall not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil," and he ate from it. Yes, Eve was deceived, right? She was tempted in that way, and she did sin. But Adam was told directly by God, "You do not eat from this tree." Now, Eve should not have acted independently and not sought counsel from Adam, right? And that carries forward into a marriage relationship. But that's what happened. But Adam himself, he was told directly by God, "You shall not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil," and he did. And so the curse came through Adam, on mankind, and all of creation. So there's the key takeaway. So I know time is flying. So roles and responsibilities, we'll just throw this out there. There's obviously a difference between men and women. I think we kind of already covered this. And it's very clear in the Bible. But we see that how the roles of women and men have been devalued. Families, communities, and nations suffer for it in numerous ways. And any examples and reasons, I mean, we all, I think, have multiple that we could sit here and chat about for hours. But something to keep in mind that when we develop our own ideas and make up our own priorities for life and try to redefine these roles, that, I mean, we see what's happening, and it's destructive, especially for children. They're stealing the innocence of children. So on that note, which bathroom? I mean, modern society, and I wrote this back in 2018, right? This is before where we're at now. This is in 2018 that I wrote this. But even back then, modern society professes intellectual superiority, yet struggles to assign gender, even to bathrooms, right? So these people who are like, "You're an idiot. How can you possibly believe this myth that's in Genesis?" Meanwhile, they don't even know where to send people to which bathrooms. And then mismatch making. So without God in the relationship equation, it's no wonder the world can't define or wants to redefine marriage. Chaos reigns in each to their own. But as a traditionalist, think about how you would give that rebuttal. If somebody were to challenge that and say, "No, they love each other. They love each other. It's okay. Let it fly." And now it's not just that you have a woman and a woman, a man and a man. You can have a man who identifies as a woman who is married to a woman. I mean, I'm not even going to go there, but it's confusing. It's really confusing, right? And you're like, see a look on Bethany's face, but it's like, no, but it's true, because I met somebody who was like that through some of the advocacy that I was doing with the school board, and they were transgendered. They had top surgery, and very eloquent speaker, seemed intelligent. And I remember, I can't refer to somebody like that as the pronoun they would probably choose. So, but he said that he was married to, I heard him say, his wife. And I'm just sitting there, I'm trying like to, just not let my head spin, but I'm like, where are we right now? And no disrespect to them as people who are on this journey we call life, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how to have this conversation with you right now. And I didn't broach the subject, and maybe it'll be on the second time I meet them, but or we'll see. I don't know. It's just a mind boggler. So moving on to the fall, we messed up, not God. So the rules were clear in Genesis 3. There was temptation and there was sin. We're accountable for the consequences. And in verse 20, Eve was named. In 21, this is Genesis 3:21, was the first sacrifice, right? So they covered themselves. All of a sudden they're like, oh, looks like we did something bad. Adam and Eve sinned. They understood that now their eyes were open. They knew that they sinned, and they were ashamed of their nakedness. So they covered themselves with, I guess, leaves, loincloths, as they called them. But then later on, God actually provides skin coverings, right? So this was the first bloodshed. And then banished them from the garden, and people are like, well, that was awful. But at the same time, if they ate from the tree of life, they would have been that curse forever. Now, this speaks to God's mercy as well, in that Adam lived 930 years. He didn't smoke him on the spot, right? Like, you sin, you're done. Or you got 24 hours to say goodbye. Adam lived 930 years. And then it just shows how when God provided the covering, that he was gracious to them. He didn't have to. He could have let them walk around ashamed, but he actually gave them a covering. And so this goes to God's character. But then how through this entire process of creation, fall, and redemption, that he is revealing his character to us through that. He's like, well, why don't you just leave it perfect? It's like, but this is somehow, some way, and I can't say I have the full answer, but it was through going from paradise to paradise lost to paradise regained that God is revealing himself to us through that. So when people say, why do bad things happen? It's like, well, there's a bit of a discussion to it, but you can explain it in this way. So there's a little question there, but about how we're subject to new aging and yang balancing act. That people they kind of put their good and their bad deeds on a scale, and they're like, am I good today? It's like, it doesn't matter. I mean, that scale it's a fantasy that we are subject to God's law and to his love. And so get back up. It's not over. So despite his disgust with our sin, we'll get into the flood. He continues to forgive because God has cared for us from day one. This is a defining difference for Christians, believing our Creator created us with purpose out of love. But people attempt to redefine God as uncaring, right? For somehow, some way, they jump into that pit of despair. God doesn't love me. He doesn't see me. He doesn't care about me. And it's an awful thing because you see this on the street. You see this in homeless people and just in friends and family. And it's something that I think we need to make an intentional effort to speak out against. So, and in a loving way. I mean, you don't want to break in and, you're not trying to like Bible thump them, but you do want to share with them the truth in some way. And sometimes that means just sitting down and saying nothing. And then maybe at some point that leads into a conversation, but showing that care and that compassion. And then hopefully it coming into a point where you can actually share the truth with them. So it often comes down to a popularity contest, though, is, for us as Christians, do we choose preference to the world to feel accepted or to lobby government for grants? I mean, if you ever watch there's some good documentaries about what happens in Ben Stein, right? And Expelled, I think is what it was called. It's a really good one. If you really want to have an eye opener as to what's happening in our institutions, like Pastor Aaron would share, these were Christian institutions that all of a sudden are extremely secular. I mean, they call themselves intelligent, but it's stupid what they are teaching. And so but a lot of times these professors will go along with it, which like we saw some doctors do, because there's money tied to it. It's their career, it's their job, it's their livelihood. And if you don't have faith in God and that he's the one who sustains you, then you will probably give into that temptation, that fear. But if you know who it is who gave you your job in the first place, and he'll find you another one if you have to leave, then you'll say what needs to be said and you won't flinch in the face of that nonsense. So will you risk your comfort zone to tell the truth? So, it's a rhetorical question. You don't have to say whether you would or not right now, but something to think about, because when you get into that situation, it's sometimes too late. right? Because you're there and you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't think about that one. But if you can at least decide before you get there how you're going to respond, suddenly the pressure's off and it makes the situation a lot easier. And I'll say this too, in debates I've gotten into, pray while you're in the debate, in the discussion. When you are speaking out, there is no time that prayer is not appropriate, So you can still listen actively and in your mind be saying, God, I need some words right now because this person is all over the map trying to, it's like you're trying to wrestle a greased pig. It's just not working. It's like, you're trying to nail down some jello and it's just like, what's happening? But you're just running in circles. But somehow you have to ground that conversation and bring it back to, to fundamental truths. And so application, okay, we're going on the hour mark here. Said hour 15, right, Pastor Chris? So, yeah, working on it. Okay, no excuses, even for the person alone on the island. So Romans 1:18-20, you can read it for yourself, but this is the punchline here, that for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So people say, well, what about the guy on the island? Well, the guy on the island, he's got animals, he's got trees, he's got sky, he's got sun, he's got moon, he's got beach, he's got waves, he's got to eat, right? So I climb a tree to get coconut. But so can anyone claim to not have the evidence of God? The answer is no, they can't. Now, do you want to be able to share, like missionaries obviously travel and they go and share the truth to people. But do people not have that question as to whether or not God exists? No, I don't believe that is the case. And according to this verse, people are without excuse. So, all have sinned. There's no favoritism. And we have all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and nobody's exempt from it. And that is a hard thing to explain, but it rolls into the conversation because eventually that's kind of where you're going with it, right? As you're trying to explain to people, this is Genesis. We all fell. It wasn't just Adam and Eve. But then there's more to it. And different people have different focuses. They may say, well, I don't believe in dinosaurs. That's crazy. Humans didn't exist with dinosaurs, whatever it might be. And sometimes you have to go down those roads with them and give them the facts, the evidence, and the truth, and have those conversations and respect the fact that they're trying to be rational, logical. They're trying to reason this. And a lot of times you have to go through, maybe you've heard this before, you have to go through the left side of the brain. This is my left, just so you guys are aware. So the left side of the brain to get to the right side of the brain, right? You have to go through feelings and emotions in order to get to the logic and the reasoning. So sometimes people have to vent before you can actually talk to them and have an adult conversation, right? So sometimes it's going to take a little more time than you may want to invest because people are angry, right? With God, they're upset with life. They've got other things going on, and maybe you have to walk through that with them a little bit before you can get to the point where you can actually have an adult conversation. Just something to keep in mind. And then blood sacrifice started in the garden and finished by Jesus Christ. So Romans 3:25, God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. So that is the cost. It started with the original sin. And that's the reality of it. Now, why somebody would need to be covered by the blood of Christ, that's something that maybe people don't understand right away. They can maybe understand that they need God, but understanding the covering, again, I guess that's a bit more of a conversation as well. But it's the truth. And so salvation is specific and exclusive, something to remember, that there isn't, many roads do not lead to heaven. There is one way. And that is something to remember in these conversations. They're going to try and lead you down multiple roads. And a lot of times what's going to happen is you're going to say, well, I studied up on, theism, naturalism, transcendentalism, and they're going to come up with their own on the spot. They will literally, all of a sudden you'll be talking to them and they'll be like, I never heard this one before, and so then it's knowing what you know and being able to bring that conversation back around to truths and whatever it is that they're struggling with. And sometimes the fact of the matter is that you're being messed with. They don't really want the answer, and you may have to dust off those sandals and walk away because you might just be wasting your time. But at the same time, I'm of the mind, I want to talk to them. I want to have that conversation. I want to see where they're at. And is there something somewhere that we have common ground on that we can actually, make progress with? So So that's what that question is. Is many ways to the next life, or is there one way to heaven and eternity with God? I think we would all agree there is only one. Faith comes through hearing. We're right at the end now, so kind of on time, not really. But faith comes through hearing. Jesus is coming to restore. So in Romans 10:17, and this is important for us as Christians to remember. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. So knowing the Bible, telling people about the Bible, it matters. And saying, I'm not going to talk to them right now, but I'm going to go home and pray for them. Well, I would say do both. All right? Pray now, talk to them now, go home and pray for them again, right? But is that there is something to saying, right, what it is, what the truth is. And then, and so from Genesis to Revelation, for Revelation 4:11, worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. So this is in Revelation, right? So this isn't just a Genesis thing. This theme of creation goes throughout the Bible. And then in Revelation 21:3-4, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. So, are we cursed forever, or is there a message to speak? And NHE means a new heavens and earth, right? There is something that needs to be told. People do need this hope. And your worldview of being about the creation and founded in the truth matters, and it can help people in a big way work through what they're missing. And it's like I said, it's a skill, something to develop. And sometimes you have that conversations, and like I said, give it a shot. Next time, maybe don't chicken out, because we've all done it. We've all turned away, tucked our tail, and they're like, I don't want to talk about this right now. But the fact of the matter is try it. And faith happens when you step out. So yeah, you prepare, but you're never fully prepared, I find. Are you ever perfectly prepared? I would say no. But when you get into that situation and you rely on God, he will give you the words to say. He will bless that conversation. I truly believe it. So, and if we as Christians don't speak the truth, who are we expecting will? Is there anybody else that God has assigned to deliver the truth to the world? The answer is no. There is only Christians. He has chosen to act through us. And so just a sober reminder, but we are not cursed forever. And while we are here, there is peace and joy available in the midst of our trials and tribulations, our pain and our suffering. And people need to hear that. They need to know that, because, it can be a crushing thing. And so kind of at the end, one little point I'll make too is that when we go back to original sin, we go back to the garden, that original sin, Adam and Eve, but really it was Satan, right? Satan, his pride and his fall. But then that carried through to Adam and Eve, pride and fall. And to this day, it continues, pride and fall, right? So it's all about this self-justification, self-devotion, self-glorifying, and that's something to just watch out for. And that when you're talking to somebody, that's part of what you're, I think, battling against, spiritually speaking. Not against flesh and blood, right? Against the principalities and powers of darkness. And so remember that. Because sometimes those conversations can get quite personal, and you feel like you're on the attack, then you're on the defense, and it's back and forth. But if you realize that you're dealing with somebody who's struggling and who is having a spiritual war of their own, it can help set the context for your conversation, your attitude, that they won't feel they're being judged, but you're there to help them and come alongside them. So we're at the end of that. I think maybe there's a little bit of time left. But so next session 2 is Law and Theory, Evidence and Bias. These are the pre-reading here. And if you haven't read Genesis 1-3, I recommend read it through. And I read it through a few times. If you have a good commentary, the Blue Letter Bible, you go and look up Yom, whatever, but dig into it. But Proverbs 36, Romans 1:20, Psalm 139, 13-16, and Colossians 1:15-20. So yeah, I think we'll probably put this out in the app too, so you guys can see it and have it as a reminder.